Hey guys, in this video we'll go through exactly how to do when using Porter's 5 forces model to analyze a company based on a competition within the industry, and I thought we'll use Tesla as an example so it will be easier to understand how to actually do the analysis. So keep watching if you want to learn how to analyze stocks like the pro. This video is part of a series in fundamental analysis, so check out the other parts if you haven't already. I will link them up here or down there, and subscribe so you don't miss out on the rest of them, where we will take a closer look at the company's numbers. During all stages of a company's life cycle and in all industries, there are different threats from competitors. Therefore, it's important to analyze what the competition in the industry looks like in order to assess the company's earnings potential in the future. And today we will do this using Porter's 5 forces model. And this analysis method isn't only used by financial analysts, but also by companies themselves in order to find out which areas they have to work on the most to maintain their position in the market. If the company is exposed to more competition, it will of course have to adjust its prices compared to the competitors, and then usually at the lower level of course, which means that they will not be able to earn as much. Consumers will of course buy the best product or those products with the lowest price if they're exactly equal, while a company that is alone in the market can set the prices solely based on the supply and demand principle, that is, based on what the consumers are willing to pay for the products. So what the competitive landscape looks like within an industry is thus very decisive in how much profit the company will be able to make, and this is of course affecting the stock price and the size of the potential dividends. So the first force is a threat from new entries, and this means that we should analyze how likely it is that a new company can enter the industry. Even if it hasn't happened yet, only the threat of this can pressure down the prices and then of course the profit for the company. So the higher the prices and above all the profit margin, the more likely it is that another company will try to enter the industry. So what you have to look at here is how high the barrier is for someone new to enter the industry. For example, how easy it is to copy the product and start competing in the same market. Is the product based on years of development and numbers of patents, or is it a simpler item that you can more easily copy without further knowledge? An advanced electronic device or a medicine, for example, is based on lots of knowledge and years of research, while a simpler item is easy to manufacture and copy. Are large financial resources required to enter the industry, or is it possible to enter the market with a smaller amount? Has the company created relationships with customers and distributors that makes it harder for someone new to get into the market? The bar can also be higher if the consumer has a high level of loyalty to the brand. For example, many people buy Apple products even though they are more expensive than some of the competitors. So if you look at Tesla based on this and focus on the electric vehicles industry, then we can first and foremost state that it isn't very easy to enter the industry. It takes a lot of capital to start a car factory, there's a lot of knowledge in the industry, and you can only make profit after you've gained a sufficient large production capacity and can utilize economies of scale. It's also expensive to manufacture electric vehicles, and Tesla hasn't even managed to make any profit from the car sales yet. Together, this means that the threat from new companies to enter the market is not very large. Tesla also has a strong brand with Elon Musk in the forefront, which makes it even harder to copy. So the next force is competition within the industry from existing firms. It goes without saying that the more companies that compete in an industry, the more price pressure there will be in general, because the different companies try to take market shares from each other. And this happens especially in more mature industries that doesn't grow as much any longer, and companies can then only grow by taking shares from each other. If the production comes with higher fixed costs, prices will also be lower, and this might sound a bit strange, but companies will then want to produce at a full capacity because it spreads the fixed costs over more numbers of products, and then this will increase their profits. So higher supply of the product means that the prices may have to be reduced in order for them to all be sold. You should also look at the products the companies in an industry produces. If they're very similar to each other, it will also be more difficult to compete by being just a little bit different, and then the prices of the product can also be lower and the profit opportunity smaller. If we look at Tesla again, then there is a pretty big threat from companies within the industry. Tesla is exposed to competition from other electric vehicle manufacturers such as the Chinese company NIO, for example. But there are also competition from more traditional car manufacturers who are also starting to develop their own electric cars. Even though there are not that many companies in the car industry, the competition is very high. Existing companies are often aggressive in their marketing, and a lot of resources is spent on research and development. There are also no high cost associated for the customer to switch to another brand, which also makes the competition higher. However, Tesla gains a lot from their strong brand, and Elon Musk as a person does a lot for the brand. Think about what Tesla would have been without him. So the next force is threats from substitutions, and here we have to consider whether there is any opportunity for a company in a related industry to compete with a substitute product. For example, sugar producers compete with the nearby corn syrup producers, or cotton producers compete with those who make synthetic fiber materials. If there is a substitute available, it will of course also put pressure on the prices on the product. Is there a substitute for electrical cars? Well, ordinary petrol and diesel cars or hybrids are of course a substitute right now, but the amount of oil is limited, so new, more environmentally friendly fuels must emerge. But you can imagine that something other than electricity will be what we will rather drive our cars with in the future. Hydrogen perhaps can be a substitute. Even though hydrogen cars are not as far ahead today, they have certain advantages compared to the electric cars. They can be driven longer without having to refuel or charge, and they're fully refueled in a few minutes compared to over an hour for a Tesla. And it's probably one of the biggest disadvantages right now with electric cars, that you cannot drive them that far and that you have to charge for relatively long times. And can the electric grid and the electricity production handle a lot of new electric cars? Another substitute can also be public transport, of course. It's clearly cheaper to take the bus or train than to buy a new Tesla, but public transport is of course also more limited than having your own car. So all in all, there's no huge threat from substitutes right now, but this may change in the future. So the fourth force in PORTER'S 5 forces model is consumer bargaining power vis-a-vis the producer. The price of a product can be pressured by the fact that there is a customer with great bargaining power who, for example, buys a large part of what the industry produces. Those who buy larger lots can of course negotiate and demand lower prices. For example, some manufacturers may put pressure on subcontractors of parts. This means that the subcontractors' profit opportunities will be lower. Customers could also negotiate the prices if there are many substitutes or competitor products, for example, and it doesn't involve any higher cost from the customer to switch to a new brand. For example, if you have a lot of linked products, it would mean that if you switch one product for a new brand, you will have to replace all of them. And then there is a higher barrier for the consumer to switch brands, which gives them a lower bargaining power. For Tesla, the customer bargaining power is not a huge threat right now. We've already stated that there is no great substitute, and each consumer only buys one or a few cars, so Tesla is not depending on a few customers, but everyone who drives a car and has a certain amount of money can be said to be a potential customer. But there's also no high barrier for a buyer to switch to another car brand, and there are some competitors, so it's conceivable that when there are more electric cars on the market in the future, customers' bargaining power will also be able to pressure down prices more. Then there is also the reversed scenario and the force of the bargaining power of the suppliers, where there is only one or a few subcontractors who almost have a monopoly on their market, and they can then demand higher prices for their products, which ultimately leads to lower profit opportunities for the manufacturer of the end product. Thus, one can imagine that a company manufacturing a product that contains a component that is only available to purchase from a single subcontractor, and this subcontractor could then charge a higher price for their component because they know the company needs this to be able to manufacture their own products. So of course it would also drive up the prices in the final product if a component including in it will become more expensive. And in principle, the more complicated a product with more components, the more subcontractors and the more dependent on these the company becomes. But if there are substitute products, this will not be a problem. And Tesla is no exception. They are of course dependent on their subcontractors. But in the automotive industry, there are quite a few subcontractors and none of them are very large, which limits their ability to negotiate higher prices from Tesla. Many are also selling their products to other distributors and not directly to Tesla, which further limits their ability to influence the prices of the Tesla cars. So there is a threat here, but it's not very large. If we look at Porter's all 5 forces altogether, we've seen that Tesla's biggest threat come from already existing competitors within the industry. So it's important that they stay ahead here and invest a lot in research and development to not fall behind. Something that is decisive for how well they will do in the future is how good the batteries can become. How much energy can it store, how good will the performance of the cars be, and how far can the cars be driven on one charge. I hope that you've gotten a feeling for how you can do an analysis of an industry's competitive landscape yourself with the help of Porter's 5 forces model. Feel free to like this video if you think it was valuable, and don't miss the rest of the videos in this series. But until then, continue watching these videos on the screen right now or linked down below in the description, and I will see you again next time.